My dad disappeared when I was 8. Not died. Not ran off in the middle of the night. Just disappeared. One day he was in the garage, working on the old Honda with grease under his fingernails and a transistor radio humming the weather report. The next, he was gone. No note. No suitcase. No goodbye. Just his coffee mug left half full on the porch railing, still warm when we found it. That was 23 years ago. And last week, I found a letter he'd written, hidden in the wall of our old house, addressed to my wife. Not my mom. Not me. My wife. And I didn't even meet her until college. Let me take you back. My name's Adam. I grew up in a 2-story clapboard house on a dead-end street just outside Tacoma, Washington. Our backyard was wild, blackberry brambles and tall grass we pretended was a jungle. I had one younger sister, Ellie, and a dog named Chester who chewed through everything but betrayal. My dad's name was Raymond. People called him Ray, or sometimes Mac, from his army days, though he didn't talk much about that. He was the quiet kind of man who fixed things without being asked: lawnmowers, fences, broken wrists of neighborhood kids who needed a cast and couldn't afford a trip to the hospital. He had calloused hands, crow's feet that came early, and a soft spot for strawberry milk. He wasn't warm, but he wasn't cruel either. And to a kid, especially one who worshipped the way a dad knew how to reverse a trailer into a tight driveway, that was enough. Then one Saturday morning in October, crisp air, fog hanging low over the yard, he went to the garage, like always. By dinner time, he hadn't come back. We thought maybe he'd gone to the hardware store. My mom called 3 of them. Nothing. His truck was still in the driveway. The garage light was still on. His wallet and keys were in the bowl by the door. It was like he'd walked out of his life and left the door open behind him. The police searched. Flyers went up. Ellie cried herself to sleep for a week straight. My mom held it together until Christmas, then shattered during midnight mass. They ruled it a voluntary disappearance. No signs of struggle, they said. No evidence of foul play. But to this day, I've never believed it was that simple. Something about the silence of it felt intentional. Too clean. Like it wasn't an escape, but an erasure. After he vanished, life didn't collapse. It just thinned. Like we were all moving through a fog a little heavier than the rest of the world. My mom got a job at the library. Ellie stopped drawing pictures. I started folding all my shirts the way he used to, tight, precise rectangles, as if that would keep something in order. And eventually, we moved out of that house. We didn't sell it. We couldn't. My grandfather had built it with his own hands, and Mom said letting it go would feel like burying 2 ghosts at once. So we rented it out. Different families came and went over the years, but the bones of the place stayed the same. And then last month, the latest tenants moved out, and the property manager called me. "You should come take a look," she said. "There's some water damage upstairs, and the attic door's warped. Might be time to consider selling." So I drove up. Just me. Ellie was out in Oregon with her kids. Mom had passed 4 years ago, brain tumor, fast and cruel. My wife, Claire, wanted to come, but I told her no. Said I needed to see it alone. She understood. Claire always understands. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was fading, the shutters hung crooked, and the front step had sunk on one side like it was giving up mid-stride. But the air still smelled the same: old wood, dust, and something faintly sweet. Like time had been baking quietly in the corners. I wandered from room to room, letting the memories settle around me. The kitchen was mostly intact. The wallpaper my mom picked, tiny yellow roses, had started to peel at the edges. The basement still had that damp chill, like it was holding its breath. Then I climbed to the attic. That's where I found it. Not the letter. Not yet. Just a loose board in the corner. The wall near the eaves, the spot where my dad used to store old army trunks and camping gear. One of the boards was bowed slightly, unnailed, like it had been placed there, not installed. I don't know what made me pry it open. Call it instinct. Call it a whisper from whatever part of my soul still waited by the window for a father who never came home. Behind that board was a small hollow, and inside it, a tin box. Army issue. Dented, rusted on one edge. I pulled it out, set it on the dusty floor, and opened it slowly. Inside were 2 things. A black and white photograph of my dad in uniform, smiling, and I mean really smiling, with his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. And a letter. Sealed. Yellowed with age. On the front, written in my dad's careful print. To Claire. When the time is right. Claire. My wife. The woman he never met. And that's when I felt the ground shift beneath me, not in a way that knocks you over, but in a way that makes you realize the story you've been living. might not be the one you were actually born into. I didn't open the letter right away. I couldn't. Not because I didn't want to know what was inside, but because I knew, the second I read it, something in me would have to change. Like crossing a bridge you don't get to come back over. I sat there in the attic for maybe 15 minutes, holding that envelope like it had a pulse. My dad's handwriting hadn't changed. Neat, angled slightly right, block letters. It was unmistakable. I'd seen it on Christmas tags, on school permission slips, and once, when I broke my arm, on a note he taped to my bedroom door. Don't pick at the cast. Let it heal. But this wasn't for me. It was for Claire. The woman I met 20 years after he disappeared. The woman who had never even heard his voice. I stared at the name again, to Claire. When the time is right. How would he have even known her name? How could he possibly write to her when I hadn't even met her? I drove home that night with the letter on the passenger seat, seatbelted like a passenger. I didn't tell Claire about it, not at first. I needed to make sense of it myself. Needed to hold it up to the light, shake it, look for seams in the reality I thought I understood. But none came. Just the envelope. Still sealed. Still waiting. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the living room with the box. Looked again at the photo. My dad had his arm around the woman. Soft curls, wide smile, a sundress that looked like it belonged in a different decade. They were on a beach. I could tell by the light. Maybe early morning, maybe dusk. You could see it in his eyes, a kind of joy I don't remember ever seeing in person. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in that same handwriting. Oceanside. August 91. Before the storm. My stomach turned. He disappeared in October of that year. 2 months later. I stared at the name again. Claire. I knew my wife hadn't changed her name. She'd always been Claire Evans. No stage name. No hidden family tree. We met in college, started slow, and grew into each other like ivy climbing opposite sides of the same wall. She never met my dad, but something in me was starting to wonder if maybe he'd met her, or someone like her. The next morning, over coffee, I told her. I expected disbelief, maybe concern, maybe even a polite brush-off. But when I said, I found a letter from my dad, and it's addressed to you, Claire didn't blink. She just set her mug down, folded her hands, and said, Where? That's when I told her everything. The attic, the tin box, the photo, the handwriting, and the envelope still sealed. She looked at it the way someone looks at a locked door in a dream, like she already knew it led somewhere she'd been before. Do you want to open it? I asked. She nodded, but quietly, like something inside her had already started unraveling. I handed it to her. She ran her fingers across the name, looked at me, then backed down. And then she said something I'll never forget. When I was a kid, she said, I had a neighbor named Ray. My heart skipped. He was older. Lived next door to us in California for a while, maybe a year, maybe less. I was 7 or 8. He fixed my bike when I fell. Used to sit on his porch and whittle little animals out of wood. My voice caught. Did he ever say where he was from? She shook her head. Not really. He was kind. Quiet. Wore a jacket even when it was hot. My mom used to bring him soup. Then one day he was just gone. Moved out. Landlord said he left early. No forwarding address. I could barely speak. Do you remember what he looked like? She looked at the photo I'd laid on the table. That's him, she said. That's the man who lived next door. Raymond Walker, my father, had lived next door to the woman I would one day marry. When she was a child, years after he disappeared from my life. And he'd left a letter. For her. Claire opened the envelope like she'd done it before, like some distant part of her had always known this moment would come. Her fingers were calm, careful, reverent. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. No date, no heading, just the weight of time pressed into thin lines of ink. She unfolded it, and as she began to read, I watched something shift in her face, not shock exactly, but something quieter, sadder. Like a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place, and she wasn't sure if she liked the picture it revealed. Then she handed it to me, and I read it. Claire, if you're reading this, it means the timing worked out. It means you grew up, that you became the woman I always knew you would. And it means he found this letter, my son, and trusted you enough to share it. I don't know when this will reach you. I don't know what the world looks like now, but I do know this. You are meant to be part of him, and that's why I left this behind. Not for answers, not for closure, but for the one thing I couldn't give you when I disappeared, a small piece of the truth. You may not remember much. Maybe the bike. Maybe the carved fox I left on your porch. Maybe nothing at all. That's okay. You were a child. But I remembered you. You were light in a year that felt like drowning. After I left my family, and yes, I left, though not in the way the stories might say, I drifted. I lived quietly. An apartment here, a rented room there. I didn't use my name. I didn't make friends. I didn't want to be found. Until I met you. You were 7, I think. Maybe 8. And one day, you sat on my porch with your knees scraped and asked if I knew how to fix a chain. And for the first time in years, I felt something human. You reminded me of my son. You reminded me of the things I lost, and the things I might still deserve to witness again. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't risk it. Not then. I'd done something I couldn't undo. Something that made disappearing feel like mercy. I hope someday, when Adam reads this, he understands. I loved him. I loved all of them. But some ghosts aren't born from death, they're born from choice. And mine was made the moment I walked out of that garage and kept walking. But Claire, if he found you, if you found each other, then maybe it wasn't all wasted. Maybe love finds its way home, even when the man who started it never could. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him. I never stopped listening for his voice, even when I didn't have the right to hear it. With all the quiet I have left. I stared at the page for a long time after that. Longer than I cared to admit. Claire sat beside me, silent, her hand on mine. And for a moment, the weight of it all pressed down so hard I couldn't breathe. He'd lived. He hadn't died. He hadn't been taken. He had walked away. And then, watched. From a distance. Close enough to touch, but too far to return. It made my skin crawl. It made my heart ache. It made me want to scream and grieve and thank him and hate him all at once. You knew him, I said quietly. Before I did. Claire nodded. Only for a little while. But yeah, I did. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of our den, the letter in my lap, the photo on the table, and the hollow feeling of something too late settling in my chest. I thought about calling Ellie. About telling her he hadn't vanished into the void. That he'd simply stepped sideways, out of our story and into someone else's shadow. But I didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't something to explain over the phone. This was something deeper. Something that would take time to carry home. The next day, I drove out to my sister's place. Ellie lived about 2 hours away, a little town outside Eugene, Oregon, all pine trees and antique shops and the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. She was outside when I pulled in, elbows deep in potting soil, her kids yelling something about a frog they swore was magical. She looked up, grinned, and waved me over like nothing had changed. But everything had. We sat on her back porch after dinner, wrapped in old quilts, watching the kids chase dusk with flashlights and bare feet. That's when I told her. I didn't start with the letter. I started with the attic. With the tin box. The photo. The handwriting. Then, carefully, gently, I handed her the letter. She didn't touch it at first. Just stared at it, eyes dark and unreadable. Are you sure it's him? She asked. I nodded. Positive. She took a long breath, like she was preparing her lungs to breathe in a truth that had waited too long. Then she unfolded the paper and read. I didn't watch her. I gave her the dignity of silence. Just looked out across the lawn, where the fireflies had started to rise. When she was done, she said nothing for a while. Then she said, he was alive all this time? Yes. And he just left. I nodded. A long pause. You know, she said finally, her voice shaking just a little, I used to dream about him standing at the end of the driveway. Just standing there. Watching. Not coming in. Not knocking. Just there. I thought it meant I missed him. But maybe it meant I knew. I think you did, I said. She looked down at the letter again, her thumb brushing the crease where it had been folded. He wrote to Claire? Yeah. Huh, she said, but there wasn't any bitterness in it. Just wonder. I guess he wanted to know we were okay, even if he couldn't face us. Do you want to keep it? I asked. She thought for a second, then shook her head. No. I think it found the right person. It was never about the letter, Adam. It was about the fact he wrote it all. We sat in the quiet for a long time after that. No tears. No shouting. Just two grown-up kids who'd spent their whole lives living with a space where a man used to be, now realizing he'd been closer than they ever imagined. Before I left, Ellie walked me out to the car. Do you hate him? She asked. I didn't answer right away. The truth was too complicated to fold into a word like that. I don't know, I said. But I don't think I love him anymore either. I think I'm just making peace with the shape he left behind. She nodded. That's enough. When I got home that night, Claire was already asleep, curled up on her side of the bed, our dog at her feet. I sat down next to her and looked at the woman I loved, the woman who had unknowingly been a thread in a story that started long before we met. And suddenly I understood something I hadn't before. My dad didn't write to her because he saw her future. He wrote to her because he saw mine. He saw a moment coming, a life that would need this bridge, this piece of connection, this strange message in a bottle. And maybe that was his way of reaching back across the decades and giving me the only blessing he had left. Not redemption, not forgiveness, just presence. Even if it came in silence. Even if it came too late. A few days later, Claire pulled something out of a box in the attic, something I hadn't seen in over 20 years. It was a small wooden fox, no bigger than her palm. Smoothed over by time, carved with careful hands. The tail curled in a half-loop, like it had been caught mid-step. One of the ears was chipped, but the eyes were unmistakably careful. Intentional. She held it out to me without a word. I took it, turned it over. There, carved faintly into the underside, R. Walker. Found it in my old memory box, she said. It used to sit on my dresser as a kid. I had no idea who gave it to me. I always thought it came from a fair or something. I nodded slowly. He left it on your porch. He mentioned it in the letter. Claire sat on the floor beside me, pulling her knees to her chest. It's strange, isn't it? The way a person can drift through your life like smoke and still leave fingerprints. I held the fox for a long time. I don't know why it hit me harder than the letter. Maybe because it was real. Solid. Made with hands I used to watch tighten bolts and fix lawnmowers. Something from him that I could touch. He stayed invisible for a reason, I said. But he still wanted to be remembered. Not as a father. Maybe not even as a man. Just as someone who loved in the only way he could. Claire was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Do you think he regretted it?" I didn't know how to answer that. Regret is a strange thing. It doesn't undo damage. It just sits beside it, asking for room. I think, I said slowly, he believed staying away was safer than returning. Safer for you or for him? I didn't respond. Because deep down, I wasn't sure which answer would hurt less. That night, I placed the fox on the bookshelf in our living room. Not hidden. Not in a drawer. Right in the open, beside the photo of Claire and me on our wedding day, and one of Ellie's kids grinning with mouths full of frosting. A reminder, not just of him, but of the way our lives cross and tangle with people we don't always understand, and how sometimes the most broken ones leave behind the gentlest things. In the weeks that followed, I started writing again. Nothing grand. Just small notes. Letters, really. To people I'd lost. People I hadn't called in years. I don't know why. Maybe because that one letter had opened a door in me, a room I didn't realize had been locked since I was 8 years old. I even wrote one to him. Didn't mail it, of course. Just wrote it, folded it, and slipped it behind the fox on the shelf. It didn't say much. Just, I got your message. She's everything you thought she'd be. I'm trying to be the kind of man you might have been if you hadn't been afraid. And I meant it. Because fear takes many forms, leaving, lying, silence. But courage? Courage can be quiet, too. It can be carving a fox for a little girl on a porch you'll never sit on again. It can be hiding a letter in the wall of a house that may never be found. It can be letting go of the version of you that caused pain, and hoping, in some small way, your shadow might still offer shelter. It's been 6 months since I opened that letter. Life didn't stop. It never does. But something shifted. Not like a storm. More like the tide pulling back after years of pushing forward, leaving behind pieces of what had always been hidden beneath. I see it now in small things. In the way I speak more gently to my nephews. In the way I linger at the bookshelf, running a thumb along the edge of the fox like it might whisper something new. In the way I've stopped waiting for the past to make sense and started letting it rest. One afternoon, Claire and I drove back to the house. The old place. Just to stand on the porch. The property manager met us there. She'd heard bits and pieces, enough to leave the attic board just as it was. I walked Claire through the rooms. Told her where my dad used to sit when he tied his boots. Showed her the gouge in the baseboard from the time I crashed my bike inside the hallway, thinking it could fit through the kitchen. She laughed. Genuinely. The kind of laugh that makes memory feel like a warm breeze instead of a weight. Then we stood in the attic, in front of the hollow where the tin box had been. She placed her hand on the beam. Closed her eyes. He waited here, she whispered. In his own way. We left the attic empty. Didn't put the board back. Didn't patch the wall. Some places deserve to breathe. I wondered if Mom would have understood, or if it would have just broken her twice. That night, back home, I pulled out the letter again. Read it slowly. Let the words land differently, not as a wound, but as a gift. A flawed, fractured gift from a man who never knew how to stay, but still tried to leave something behind. That's the thing about love. It doesn't always show up with answers or apologies. Sometimes, it comes wearing a disguise. Sometimes, it arrives 20 years late, folded into paper, tucked inside a wall. And sometimes, it arrives as a letter to someone else, telling you what you never knew you needed to hear. Claire didn't need him to be her neighbor, but maybe I needed him to be hers. Maybe I needed to know that before he vanished from my life, he made one last good choice. He showed kindness. He saw a future and tried, in his own broken way, to reach for it. I don't know where he went after that. Maybe he died alone in some desert town with no forwarding address. Maybe he lived quietly under another name until the years caught up with him. I may never know, but I know this. He loved me. He loved the shape of who I might become. And through the one person he chose to remember, the one he left a letter for, he found his way back to me. Not perfectly, not fully, but enough. Enough for peace. Enough for closure. Enough to put down the weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying since I was 8 years old. My father didn't come home, but he gave me the next best thing. He let me go. And in doing so, he gave me the space to become a better man than the one who disappeared. The man who stayed. The man who writes his son a letter, not to explain who he is, but to help him understand who he could be. That letter still sits behind the fox. Not because I need it anymore, but because sometimes the past deserves a shelf. Not a shrine, not a fire, just a quiet place to rest. And in that quiet, I hear him, finally. Not the man who left, but the one who almost stayed.